Alright, we're gonna do a quick re-Maiden of the Sky Eagle. Just do a quick tuning flight. We're going to be calibrating the compass and the airspeed. We're just basically going to take off, circle around a little bit, and let it log some data, and airspeed is going to automatically calibrate itself. And after I land, I'll load up the compass, the log, and calibrate the compass from that. So let's go ahead and get into the air and see how it goes.
Armed.
Alright, so we've armed. We're going to switch to fly-by-wire A and take off. Alright, so far everything's good except for my diversity controller. It's not switching because I have it set just to use the main receiver, something I forgot to do before the flight started. So we're just going to stay over in this area for just a minute. Although everything definitely feels good so far. What I want to do is go ahead and do return to home, which is going to be flight mode 6. Actually, let me fly a little bit farther out so that we're not right on top of home when I initiate that. You see, we do have a little bit of a crosswind from the east to the west, which you can kind of see. It's pushing us to the right now. As we turn into the wind, we kind of slow down a little bit. Ground speed slows a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do return to launch. And allow it to do its thing while I walk over here and set my diversity controller. Alright, so now we're on diversity. It should be able to switch as it sees fit. So the airplane should loiter this position, and you hear my diversity controller is switching now. Although the video is going to suffer because we are flying directly overhead of my receivers, which are sitting right down there. And you see that message on the screen. It's setting the airspeed ratio right now. So the reason we're circling directly overhead, which is kind of making the video a little bit sketchy, is that I didn't set a rally point, which I will do later. And my loiter radius is also rather tight, as you can see. That's another thing I haven't set up yet. I probably should look at that after this flight, maybe widen it a bit. But nonetheless, the airplane is doing a really good job of holding its altitude and circling that waypoint. And everything looks good. And with this wide angle lens, when you look down like that, it kind of makes everything feel kind of weird, and like this turn radius a little bit more pronounced than it actually is. If we look back out over the nose here, you can see everything kind of feels good. Pretty normal. And you see it's still adjusting that airspeed ratio. So what we want to do is just kind of loiter this position, and I guess just wait for it to stop changing that ratio, because if I remember right, it changes that, I want to say every 2 seconds, not 2 seconds, maybe it was every 2 minutes. I'm not sure how often it actually updates the ratio in the parameters, but it's only going to store them into the non-volatile memory every 2 minutes, if I remember right. And that's only if it's more than 5% change from the previous value. But pretty much what I want to do is just let it keep loitering here until I stop seeing that message come up that it's adjusting the ratio, so it kind of will indicate that it's happy with the ratio that it has set. And once we reach that point, we will go ahead and get it back on the ground, and airspeed will be calibrated, and then we can set the flight controller up to use it. Because right now it's functional, but it's not using airspeed to navigate. Now you can see it has adjusted once again. Seems to be dropping the ratio down. The first time I saw it was like 1.8 or 1.6 a couple of times, and now we're like 1.58. But and yeah, so as you can see, we do have full pan and tilt now. We have enough to look back far enough to see the tail back there, the elevator. Any farther than that, we would just be looking into the fuselage anyway. We can do the same thing over to this side. We can look up over the wing. We can look down far enough to see over the side of the fuselage like that. And of course we can look down in the nose too, which is just kind of gets in the way, but we can look down enough to see over the nose, or we can peer down either side. Pretty well see straight down under the airplane. So that's pretty neat, pretty fun to play with. Will be nice when we start doing some longer cruising flights with it later. So yeah, I just want to kind of let it loiter here for a minute, and I want to see if that airspeed updates again. I haven't seen it too recently. Just kind of curious if my ground speed is going to go up when we go downwind. Yeah, you can see the ground speed's picking up over the airspeed. Airspeed seems pretty stable there at like 43 miles an hour. And I do have my target cruise throttle right now set for like 50% throttle, which is where the little airplane tends to like to cruise at. But you can see it's kind of pushing the throttle up a little bit, especially on the downwind side, just to maintain altitude, which is exactly what it's going to do. And that should get even better once we start letting the autopilot use the airspeed sensor to navigate. So I'm going to go back to fly-by-wire.
Fly-by-wire A.
And I'm going to set my cruise throttle. And I'm just curious if it's going to maintain its altitude here. It's a slow climb, which is probably good enough. I would say I don't think we'll need to tweak that too much later once we do start tuning everything. But we'll get to that stuff later. Like I said, we haven't done an auto tune or anything. But basically, before I get caught up cruising around out here too much, I want to go ahead and cut the power and get the airplane back on the ground so that we can save that airspeed calibration. Because basically, you don't want to fly long, straight legs in the flight while you're doing the airspeed calibration. You can see it actually just updated once again. But if you fly long, straight legs in a flight, it can trip the calibration up and get things off a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and power up a little bit here. Carry some speed out. Line up on the runway, and we'll call this a successful quick re-Maiden, just to get enough data to finish setting things up in the flight controller. Go ahead and cut power and start. It's felt a little bit weird there. Probably got a little bit too slow. But we'll go ahead and start taxiing back, and like I said, we'll be able to finish setting some things up in the flight controller with the compass and the airspeed, and we'll go from there. So our next flight should be a more traditional flight, or maybe we'll just do some more tuning stuff as far as like the TECS parameters and all that good stuff, which is Total Energy Conservation System, if I remember right. It could be wrong, but it's basically teaches the autopilot how to fly the airplane, or how to expect the airplane to fly. So yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and cut this one now and disarm.
Disarmed. Manual.
We'll go back to manual flight mode and end the flight. Quick little 10-minute video. It's back in the air. Pretty happy with it so far. And we'll see where we go from there. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully we'll be able to get to fly in a couple more days according to the weather. So I will see you all then.